This is a republic, if you can keep it, with Mark Brewer and Jeff Timmer.
You're not supposed to be able to beat $70 million of outside spending. A record amount of money spent in a campaign against a Democrat in a primary in any campaign. You're not supposed to be able to beat that. And what we showed is that the power of our many is greater than the power of their money.
I'm Mark Brewer. Welcome to the Some Candidates Win While Money Loses episode of A Republic If You Can Keep It. In multiple battles on Election Day, some candidates won despite being heavily outspent. That list includes Abdul El-Sayed prevailing over Haley Stevens with her $60 million support from outside groups. And the Republican side, GOP gubernatorial candidate Perry Johnson spent another $30 million plus of his personal fortune, only to lose to gubernatorial nominee John James. In Detroit, multimillionaire Congressman Sri Thanadar outspent his opponents dramatically, but this time he lost to State Representative Donovan McKinney. And in mid-Michigan, for another example, an activist named William Lawrence was outspent 3-1 by both of his opponents, but they split the vote sufficiently to let him slip through with a plurality of the vote.
I'm Jeff Timmer. The general election is 89 days away, with early voting beginning in about 6 weeks. The war of words, however, is well underway, with Republicans already branding all Democrats as communists, socialists, cannibals, whatever, wussy, woke, anti-police, bedwetting, pro-criminal vegans.
Jeff, can you come up with any more negatives there? That's a pretty good list. Donald Trump took a break from his never-ending golf vacation to launch a couple more grifts, this time selling insider information through his Truth Social scam, bamboozling 2 gullible U.S. senators into voting to confirm his personal criminal defense attorney, Todd Blanche, as Attorney General. That will reinforce his one-of-a-kind immunity deal from paying all the taxes he owes. He also issued a still another 2 days prediction for the endless Iran war.
Meanwhile, the Trump-run government continues its manifestly incompetent management of the federal government. The explosive diarrhea is becoming a national epidemic, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. proves once again. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, even as Trump's apologists in the Senate try to shift blame for the latest pandemic onto Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And Trump may have to give one of his one-time favorite former Fox News shouters the boot. Jeanine Pirro had to admit in court that Trump screwed up when he gave a no-bid contract to his pool guy for the reflecting pool restoration. Turns out it wasn't vandals, it was shoddy work that caused the problems at the pool. But the master builder is starting over again at the White House, where he's now reworking the helicopter pad after suddenly discovering that the White House lawn isn't flat. And he's unveiled the gold leaf-encrusted statues at the Lincoln Memorial, which just add to the misery of the diarrhea epidemic.
Perhaps one of the most entertaining developments so far this cycle happened right here in Michigan in the Republican primary in the 8th Congressional District, the one represented by Democrat Kirsten McDonald-Rivet, which is a Harris +1 district. Should be a very close district that she's made relatively safe. Donald Trump had endorsed Republican Amir Hassan, which prompted candidate Thomas Smith to withdraw from the race back in June. However, Smith was still on the ballot, and he won. And not only he won, but he won overwhelmingly 2-1 over the Trump-endorsed Amir Hassan.
Jeff, let's start this week with the U.S. Senate race, which everybody in Michigan and nationally continues to talk about. It was far, far closer than virtually every poll predicted. Pollsters really took a bath on that one, Jeff. A tip of the hat, by the way, to Epic MRA, one of our sponsors and frequent guests, who correctly showed, it may have been the only firm that showed, that it was a very tight contest. But now the big post-election question is, Jeff, can Democrats unite and then attract a majority of independents to beat an admittedly tough opponent in Mike Rogers? Let's hear your thoughts, and I've got a lot to share as well.
The short answer is yes. I have no doubt. And one of the things, I guess I'll give you the same answers and observations and analysis that I've given dozens of times in the last kind of 48 hours talking to the reporters here in Michigan and across the country about this race is, hey guys, there was other races on the ballot too. The Senate race was one of the races. The Republicans had a very contested, very divisive, very bitter, very expensive gubernatorial primary. And the thing to look at here isn't it, the Democrats aren't the ones with the problem right now that everyone wants to focus on and talk about. This is a manufactured circumstance. It's just not the case. You can't paint a scenario where you would rather be the Republicans in Michigan today than the Democrats. And, you can't just cherry pick the battle between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens and say, aha, this was very divisive and the Republicans are demagoguing, and they're already out doing it nationally, and Mike Rogers are demagoguing. You're not going to hear anything from them except crime, communism, and 9/11 when it deals with Abdul El-Sayed, and it's going to be the most racist campaign that we've seen in modern history. Day one has shown that. It has started off as this, he has brown skin, he has a different religion. What they're effectively saying is white women run for your lives. I mean, this is Willie Horton on steroids. And the reason that it's going to be such a tough road for Republicans is they are tethered to a president that is so unpopular and a party's job performance that is loathed by the voters in Michigan and across the country. It is going to be very difficult. They have nothing to run on. Mike Rogers cannot run on the economy. He cannot run on national security. He has to run against. And I'm not saying that can't be effective, because that's what Donald Trump has done all along. But it's going to be very difficult for Mike Rogers, for John James to overcome the palpable anxiety and fear and anger that people have about the economy. What they see is the incompetence and unforced errors with the tariffs, the war, the lack of concern, this callous disregard for the plight of normal Americans in favor of Trump's rich cronies and Mike Rogers' rich cronies, saying, when they're saying things like, oh, the shoe might pinch a little while, suck it up. His gas prices are over $4. And when the first hurricane, let alone the second, hits this fall, as always happens, and, hits the refineries on the Gulf Coast, gas spikes to $5 a gallon because of disruptions in supply. Right in time for the election, when Blue Cross and the health insurers announced their 20% premium increases as a backdrop to the fall election, as people are already losing access to health care. And this is no longer a Democrat versus Republican issue. Republicans, especially rural Republicans, who have been kind of the backbone of the realignment of some of the voting patterns in Michigan and across the country, they're the ones feeling this the hardest. The inflation, the lack of access to healthcare, the crazy costs that have gone into the healthcare. It's going to be I think it's certainly going to be a bruising fall. Not saying that Jocelyn Benson or Abdul El-Sayed, that this is going to be easy, but it's going to, I don't think there's much question that this is going to be a wave year for the Democrats. It's just, how big does that wave crest? Are we looking at 2018? Are we looking at an even higher Democrat tsunami like 2006? Or possibly bigger wave than that? That's really the question at this point. As we've said all year long, it's not a question of, will this be a year that favors the Democrats? It's just by how much. And we know the Republican playbook. It's going to be 1952 Joseph McCarthy meets 2001 9/11, and that's what we're going to hear. And it wouldn't have been any different. They would be calling Haley Stevens a communist, socialist, cannibal, the same as they're calling Abdul El-Sayed one. I would rather be the Democrats today in Michigan and across the country with Jocelyn Benson, Abdul El-Sayed, and candidates like Will Lawrence in Michigan 7. The energy, the enthusiasm gap, it can be apples to oranges to look at primary results or numbers and turnout and make conclusions about general election implications. But the turnout disparity is yet another data point in the enthusiasm gap. The Republicans had an open seat, knockdown, drag-out contest where one candidate spent $35 million to get 35%. $1 million per percent. Pro tip to Perry Johnson and John Yob: should have spent $51 million. It might have turned out better for you. They had a big battle. They got less than 1 million votes. The Democrats had a big battle. They got 1.5 million votes. They got 400,000 more Democratic votes than ever before in an August primary. Those are new voters. Those are voters who are enthused. It's a similar dynamic to the one a lot of Republicans and a lot of the political world ignored in 2016, myself included, when Donald Trump was drawing new voters, big crowds at these rallies, and we were kind of poo-pooing that as, oh, you can't necessarily equate rally sizes to, turnout in elections. Well, I think the last decade has shown that populist movements encourage and people to come out and support their populist candidate. And we saw that in Michigan with Abdul El-Sayed, with Donovan McKinney, with Will Lawrence. And if I was the Republicans taking a sober look at this, I'd be afraid at what I'm seeing, because there are people who are willing to crawl across broken glass to vote against Donald Trump and what the Republicans like Mike Rogers and John James will do to Michigan. And moreover, to support candidates that they're excited about and that they believe in. And I think that's going to be a big difference maker.
Jeff, I'm going to push back a little bit. I think you make some great points, as always. First, I want to make a little aside on DSA and progressive candidates. I wouldn't regard their success on Tuesday as a mandate. It was a real mixed bag. I think Democrats in the primary voted for those candidates because of issues, not because they were labeled DSA. And if you look at where they won, Abdul El-Sayed, Lawrence in Lansing, McKinney, they were all close. Those were close elections, and sometimes there were other factors. For example, with McKinney in Detroit, there's no question that race played a role in that election. We've seen that kind of stuff before. So again, I don't think it was this kind of press play out there that there was some kind of DSA progressive tidal wave in Michigan on Tuesday. I think is wrong. A number of their candidates did actually lose down ballot. I don't take anything away from them. They campaigned on issues that were attractive to people. In large part, they were talking about issues that were attractive to people in Michigan, like data centers and that kind of stuff. But let me turn back to the Senate analysis. But I did want to get in those comments about the DSA, the progressives, where they are here. Look, I agree with you. Trump is an anchor, multiple anchors around the neck of every Republican candidate this year. On top of that, Rogers is, running as an establishment candidate in a obviously anti-establishment year. He's got a lengthy voting record that can be cherry-picked, if not worse, for votes. So he does have a lot of disadvantages. On the Democratic side, let's talk specifically about El-Sayed. He's energetic. You're right. This should be a very strong Democratic year. The high turnout in the Democratic primaries, I think, is a good sign. It reinforces what you've been saying, that it looks like a Democratic year. The Democratic Party had a good series of unity events this week. Some of them were campaign and candidate specific. Others were broader, and there's another event in Detroit tomorrow. So he's got all that going for him. But he does have, admittedly, a lot of controversial issue positions, abolishing ICE, defunding the police. His position on the Middle East is controversial, to say the least, and that was obviously a huge issue in the primary. And so, frankly, I'm going to be a little presumptuous here and offer him some advice for the general election, which I think will enable him to better take advantage of the political environment. First, I think he needs to humanize himself, Jeff. At this point, his image, and it got him through the primary, I grant him that, is basically he's an angry man, right? Raging against AIPAC and whatever else he thought was advantageous. I think he needs to humanize himself. Look, he's a son. He's a good husband. He's a good father. People need to see him as a human being. And I think that will help counteract a number of things you talked about, Jeff. You know, he's not a stereotype. And if they come at him, and they have started already this week, you know, that he's a racist, he's an anti-Semite, he's the other, et cetera, that's harder to do if voters see him as a human being, right? It's less easy. It's not as easy to stereotype him. So that's one thing I think he regionally needs to do. Frankly, I think his advertising needs to change dramatically. We shouldn't see any more ads with AOC and Bernie Sanders and out-of-staters. His ads need to focus on Michigan, him interacting with people in Michigan. Again, that'll help humanize him as well. But this is not a national election in that sense that these national figures are going to carry the day. They may have helped him in a primary. I think in general is a very different matter. And the other thing I think he's really got to do, he's got to be, on the Democratic side, he's got to be a humble winner. He and his supporters just cannot assume that everybody who voted for Haley Stevens are just going to fall in line. What's the old adage, Jeff? Republicans fall in line, Democrats, we have to fall in love. Fall apart, right. or we have to fall in love first. But you don't fall in love without being persuaded, without being wooed. And I think particularly after this primary, he needs to do that. He needs to spend some time talking to, working with, addressing. Obviously, you can't do it on an individual basis, but you can do it in a variety of ways. Stevens supporters. He was very generous talking about her this morning at the Unity event. It's a great start. She was equally generous in her praise. There's even a picture of them hugging each other, which I think, again, these events this week, hats off to Curtis Hertel, the party chair, for organizing these events. But he needs to make a big pivot, I think, away from the primary election strategy, which worked close, but it worked, into a different general election strategy. And none of the things I've said means he has to change his position. That's not what I'm saying. But I think he needs to present himself in a very, very different way and become much more focused on Michigan, our problems, being a human being, somebody who can relate to him. And some of the most successful Democratic candidates have been like that. Carl Levin, one of my favorite United States senators. I mean, he was just an endearing human being. And people across the political spectrum liked him. They may not have agreed with him. And there are many Republicans that would say this over the years. I don't agree with Carl, but, you know, I can relate to him. He's likable. He's honest. And I think he just needs to humanize himself. And that, I think, will help overcome some of these negatives which they're going to toss at him. So that's kind of three things I would advise Abdul El-Sayed to do looking toward the general election.
Amen, Mark. I've made similar comments to reporters this week about the tone, the talking points that you choose to build a primary campaign around are one thing. And he was successful in doing that. Not as successful as I had thought. I thought this was going to be a wider win for Abdul. I think I had indicated that last week. It shows that there is no mandate for any one policy position or, DSA versus mainstream establishment, whatever you want to call it. Factions within the parties are normal. It's existed in the Republican Party for a long time. It's existed in the Democratic Party for a long time. These are coalitions of different interests that come together, and they have oftentimes difference of opinions. The thing to do, and to successful candidates, politics is a game of addition. It's a game.
Right.
It's about. You don't say, okay, I won. Those who didn't vote for me, get on board now. You have to show that humbleness, that humility, that you have to reach across and entice them to join you because, they voted against you. They don't have an obligation to just now support you unless you give them a reason. And so everything Abdul has said, since Tuesday night, yesterday, I saw with my own eyes hug this morning between Abdul and Haley. I listened to her. She has been incredibly gracious. Losing sucks. Coming so close sucks more. It really, losing hurts. But when you lose by a big margin, you at least don't second guess everything you've done and for the rest of your life.
Yep.
It really, it is an emotional pain. Losing candidates go through a state, they experience grief, and she's, I think, acting very graciously under the circumstances. And so is Abdul. And I think the what they said, how they said it, how they act, their body language, it's genuine. They are concerned about the people of Michigan. They believe very strongly that what we're seeing from Washington, from Donald Trump, this isn't politics. This isn't normal. What's happened to America the last 10 years, this is not normal. We have the greatest threat to this country than we've seen since the Civil War. And it's coming from inside. It's coming from the White House and the gelded Congress, the Republicans in Congress who have just sacrificed all power to fealty to the president. Mike Rogers is, again, he has willingly handed over his manhood to Donald Trump. He's backing things that he knows are wrong. He knows that Donald Trump is incompetent with the economy. He knows he's incompetent with the war in Iran, with so many things. But Mike Rogers is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, because this isn't like in 2006, the wave year I mentioned before, when George W. Bush was president. I was running the Michigan Republican Party then, and we had candidates all up and down the ticket, from Dick DeVos running for governor, Mike Cox and Terry Land running for re-election for Attorney General and Secretary of State. And George Bush was very unpopular. He was down in the mid-30s in his job approval. And he didn't go out, fly into Oakland County and expect the U.S. Senate candidate to stand on stage with him and, kiss his ring in front of everybody, make him say uncle, and, say, you've my unpopularity I will give to you. The White House knew that candidates had to set their own identity, build their own brand, because at the time the president's was not a good one.
More on a republic if you can keep it after these messages.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve on Michigan's public policy landscape? Look no further than Michigan Information and Research Service Incorporated, or MERS. MERS is your go-to source for comprehensive, nonpartisan news and analysis on Michigan's government and public policy. But that's not all. A MERS subscription also gives you access to our powerful legislative monitoring and tracking tools. Stay on top of every bill, amendment, and vote with real-time updates, detailed reports, interactive committee transcripts, legislative analysis tools, and more. Whether you're a policymaker, lobbyist, or just a concerned citizen, MERS keeps you informed with daily updates, exclusive interviews, and detailed reports. Subscribe today and gain access to our extensive archives. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay ahead with MERS. Visit MERS.news to learn more and subscribe. That's MIRS.news. Don't miss out on the insights that matter most.
When most of us think about polling, the focus is on those campaign polls telling us which candidates are winning. But the most important polls are for businesses, local governments, and nonprofits assessing the needs and wants of their customers or constituencies.
Those are polls that guide policies and lead to institutional success. Those polls have to get it right, which makes the choice of a public opinion research firm critical. Epic MRA has been trusted for more than 4 decades to get it right. Our clients have included school boards, statewide nonprofits, corporations, as well as the candidates and news media who rely on us during political campaigns. Whether it's just a couple of questions or a full in-depth survey, we are here and ready to help.
You can reach us at epicmra.com.
Tonight, the general election begins. Tonight marks our opportunity to grow our coalition to include citizens in every corner of our state who believe, as we do, that the power of the people must always be greater than the people in power. My life work is about making that promise, that hope, a reality.
Why don't we shift gears, Mark, and talk about what we saw on the Republican side, the governor's race. The Republicans are trying to downplay this. Oh, we really didn't have a competitive battle. No, they did, up until the point they didn't. You had Perry Johnson, the candidate who didn't get the Trump endorsement, continuing to spend money like a drunken 80-year-old sailor. He spent more than $30 million. There was a knockdown, drag-out battle for all year long for the Republican gubernatorial nomination. And when you look at turnout around the state, I would be very worried. I had said last week, I really felt that the Democrats' best chance in Congressional District 7, for instance, was Bridget Brink or Matt Masdom, because of their backgrounds in national security. Brink being the former ambassador to Ukraine who quit because she disagreed with Donald Trump and this prosecution of the war, or lack thereof, backing Ukraine, his refusal to do so. And Matt Masdom with his military background, and Will Lawrence, I think a lot of the political world discounted him until they didn't. And when I looked at the number of people he brought into the race, the energy on the ground, there's a there. It's not the end all. And we talked about this, the big money, several instances where the big money came out on the losing side. And that's this is another instance. But he did demonstrate the ability to raise enough money to have the ante on the table. And then his ground game was something incredible. And so my proclamation last week that he would lose to Tom Barrett may turn out to be true. But if I'm Tom Barrett, I'm looking at the numbers in that district and knowing that you can't vote for a Democrat or a Republican in the U.S. Senate or governor and then flip over and vote for a Democrat for Congress. Tom Barrett he had 80%. There were 80% fewer votes in the Republican primary in Tom Barrett's district than there were in the Democrats. Democrats were almost twice as many Democrats, turned out. It's a good way to say that as I fumble around. And so I would be very worried about the energy that we're seeing. People are angry at the status quo, and the status quo is Washington. It's the status quo is Trump. The status quo is Republicans. They are angry. This is a change election. We've had change elections since 2016. Every election has been about change, and this one is no different. And to be the incumbent, to be tied to this historically unpopular administration in Washington is just not a good position. And the Republicans, they might want to put some spin on this, but it is putting lipstick on a pig. There's the reason that they have so many fewer votes, so many fewer chances to win in November is because their brand is toxic. It's not the Democrats who have the problem. It's not the Democrats who are divided. It's not the Democrats who have to kind of shouldn't be out there trying to convince people that they can still, we can still win the Senate seat. We can still win here. The Republicans should be the ones making that case, because when you look at every single thing that drives the election and the way people end up voting historically, the needle points toward the Democrats. Ask yourself today, which would you rather be? If you could be one or the other, would you want to be tethered to Donald Trump, or would you want to be from the party who's not that? It really is a case. Are you for MAGA or are you for Michigan? And it's a mutually exclusive choice. And I think that's going to be the mantra from the Democrats: MAGA or Michigan.
That's a good point, Jeff. You make good points. I think this is another example. We saw this in the Democratic Senate primary of, I love our friends in the media, but there's such a herd mentality, right? And the herd now is focused on the Senate and on the Democrats, ignoring, like you pointed out, the very obvious divisions in the Republican Party. I mean, look, there's no love for John James in the Republican Party. The grassroots don't like him. They think he was taking advantage. They think he was being presumptuous. He didn't campaign very much. He's not charismatic. He doesn't inspire folks to come out. And I think that showed in the turnout numbers and even in the grumbling I've heard and seen since the election that, nobody should read this as some kind of mandate for John James. Republicans may not come out to vote for him because of this lack of enthusiasm. And you're right, he's got all the other negatives too. He is part of the D.C. establishment. He's a member of Congress. And then he's also got the Trump record that he's got to deal with. So, no, you're right, Jeff. There needs to be more attention paid legitimately to the divisions, the lack of enthusiasm, and the problems inside the Michigan Republican Party. From the governor's race on down the ballot, these divisions are there. And it's a good point. I'm glad we talked about this on the podcast this week and didn't spend all of our time talking about the Democrats in the Senate race.
Yeah, and you brought up something there that, I think has been missing from the conversation. Being a member of Congress, the congressional majority right now, the House majority, if you think Donald Trump's approval is bad, explosive diarrhea is more popular than congressional Republicans. And John James is one. And here's I guess I want to, another thing that I think is certainly lost among most of the reporting, especially national reporters looking at Michigan, is the effect of straight party voting in Michigan. It's something that most states don't have, but Michigan does. And that is a huge, huge benefit right now, I think, to Democrats who, my analysis of this over decades has been Democrats vote more by straight party than Republicans do. That's why back in the day, Republicans, myself included, and our good friend Bob LeBrandt and others were always trying to remove straight party voting as an option. And now it is a benefit to Democrats to go in, check that one box, in the old days, pull that one lever and walk out. And that's going to be a big factor, I think, in the Democrats' favor this year, especially when, look, a supermajority of the electorate in Michigan and across the country right now are dissatisfied with the direction of the country and the direction of politics. They are ready for a change. They have the torches, they have the pitchforks, they're heading toward the castle. And if you are an incumbent and if you are tied to the let them eat cake regime that has turned the White House into this ugly bordello Versailles, I would not want to be them in a time where people are. You can't ask for a better backdrop if you oppose Donald Trump and the Republicans and the assault that they're waging against our Constitution, the rule of law, common sense, and decency, as well as our economy, and not see that people are hurting economically and they're painting everything with gold spray, bragging about the personal jets they're able to buy because of Donald Trump's tax cuts and building ballrooms and golden arches and everything else, while Americans are just going, WTF, dude. That alone, I would not want to be John James, and he can't pretend he's not part of that regime in Washington that is so tone deaf to regular Americans.
Jeff, you put me in the mind of one of my political heroes, Governor Soapy Williams in the 1950s. And if Chairman Hertel or other Democratic leaders are listening to us, it may be time to revive the slogan from the 1950s, which was "Make it emphatic, vote straight Democratic." This may be the year to revive that phrase and use it, Mr. Chairman. So I throw that out there for you.
Send a message.
Send a message.
Well, now that we've got it all figured out and we've predicted what's going to happen in November, you guys can just, relax. Everything's going to be cool. With that, that's a wrap for this week's excursion. We are reloading on popcorn as we get ready for these next 3 months, the 89 days of endless advertising everywhere we go now, including our phones. So you can sit in the bathroom and Look at political ads. And, everyone on the ballot is either a Trump stooge or a communist. Remember that.
We thank you, everybody, for listening to Jeff and I give our free campaign advice every week. For our audio-only audience, this is a reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is free. There's a link to the channel on our website, arepublicpodcast.com.
And unlike Trump, we mean it when we tell you if the Republic is still standing. Mark and I will be back next week. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
A Republic, if you can keep it, is a copyrighted presentation of Michigan Citizens for a Better Tomorrow.